you. Thank you for joining me today. I've got two amazing guests, and I am really psyched to have them with me. Uh, my first guest is Jade Perry. Jade Perry is the co founder of the Mystic Soul Project. Her current projects include The Churchy Mystic, a collection of essays on folk healing, Afrofuturism, ancestry, time travel, and spiritual activism. It launches spring 2020 through the Mystic Soul Press. You can get more information on that at mysticsoulpress.com. Another project that she works with is called Embodied Rituals, Art and Intuitive Wellness. And the Embodied Rituals Project is a creative art and intuitive wellness project meant to help Black and people of color churched women to unlearn spiritualized and internalized sexual and sensual repression. Also want to make you aware of her Savor, Savor conference that's coming in 2020. To get more information, check it all out at mysticsoul.com, or you can go to JT, as in Tom, Perry.com. My second guest is Candice Marie Benbow. All right, Candice Marie Benbow, one of my favorite people, and she went out for a moment, I think, but she's back with us. Candice is a theologian, essayist, and a creative who situates her work at the intersection of faith, feminism, beauty, and culture. Many of you know she created that now famous lemonade syllabus that's gone around the world and been downloaded over 600,000 times, and has been used in universities and high schools in the United States, Canada, and elsewhere to help people design new Black feminist and womanist thought courses. In 2015, she created Red Lip Theology, a womanist movement to encourage women to embrace themselves as good creation. And through Red Lip Theology, Candice merges theological ideals with beauty industry participation to celebrate Black women's spirituality. I know she's personally most proud of having established the Louise Marie Foundation in honor of her mom through a memorial scholarship named in honor of her mother. The foundation provides book stipends and certification exam scholarships to nursing students. And they're also now doing some things with mental health. I am just excited that they are both with me. And I just want to say welcome to both of them. Good morning. Good afternoon, Candice. Good afternoon, Jade. I think we may have lost Candice momentarily. Let's see if we can get her back. And she's saying that she's on, and she can hear me, but we're having some difficulty seeing her. You all know technology does what it wants to. So we're going to just ask our tech person to see if they can work on that. And so that we can get her picture back. We've got her voice, but we want to see her as well. So let's see if we can get some help so that we can see and hear Candice. Candice, can you say good afternoon to us? Okay. Now I can't, unfortunately, see or hear Candice. Jade, can you say good afternoon to us?
Yes. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can. You may want to turn your mic up just a little bit. We know that you were doing a lot of things over the weekend and kind of lost that voice.
Yes.
You feeling better?
I am. I had a training on spiritual activism.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a lot of talking and a lot of sharing and a lot
Right.
of people and a lot of places. And so I'm still in the space of resting and recovery. Of course,
Okay.
I love being here with you and love being here with all of the viewers. Hopefully, can you hear me a little bit better? I just moved it a little closer.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you better.
Okay.
So we're going to begin with Jade, and hopefully by the miracle of technology, Candice will come back in and join us as well. So we're just hoping that that's going to work out. Jade, we're going to begin with you, and I know that you ground much of your work in healing Black women and queer people. Tell me why that is.
Yes. So I think it's important to actually start off with a little bit about my spiritual and ancestral lineage, and then it will make kind of sense why these are the
Okay.
people that called to me. So my great 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 grandmother, Julia Weston, was a folk healer in Florida, and people would come and see her for words of encouragement, words of discernment. And then on the other side of my family, on my maternal side, my great 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 grandfather constructing a church, a Baptist church in Malden, West Virginia. And it was a space where free Black people and Black people that were enslaved could come and worship and learn within community. And so I think for me, and then my mother went on to do community wellness and health work. And so for me, it's always been about being in a space of alignment with the healing and the liberation of people of color, but more specifically of Black people, because this is my lineage. This is what I know, And when I started my grad work and started to look at identity development, particularly for emerging adults, I began to see the role that spirituality had in sense of belonging and resilience and being able to continue on through, all of the goals that they had for their life. And so for me, I think a part of it is my own lived experience as a Black queer woman, as a Black queer femme. And then another part of it is because this is the work that I do. This is the work that I'm called to. This is the work that I'm drawn to. And because I think that there are never too many resources that can reach the spaces and the places and the intersections of Black women and Black queer people, particularly those that come from church contexts. And because my lineage has been about both the folk healing and the intuitive and gifts of discernment and the formal structures, I think for me, part of my life work has been looking at how can we use both of these spaces and places and geo-spiritual spaces as sites of healing.
Okay. That makes sense. What an amazing lineage, and to be in touch with it and to be blessed by it and grow from it. That's amazing. So when you talk about working with healing and working at intersections and etc., what does that look like for vulnerable communities within the church? And how do you think the church sometimes impedes that healing?
So that's a very layered question, and I love it because I think I would say for the past 4 or 5 years, I've really been growing into my own interpretation of what it means to be a churchy mystic, and what it means to be someone who looks at mysticism through a Black diasporic lens, which includes all different kinds of folklore and mythology and spirit, and being open to what spirit is doing. And so when you're open to what spirit is doing, sometimes spirit will be like, you need to stay in this context. And sometimes spirit will be like, it's time for you to do these other things.
Right.
And so for me, what it has looked like is creating art that allows people of color, that allows Black people, that allows queer people of color, that allows queer Black people to see the divine in themselves and see the divine in each other. An experience, to be a mystic is to have a personal experience with the divine as you understand it. And so my art and my work and the things that I write and the conferences and all of this is really about creating a space, creating a context, creating a place where people can have an experience with the divine that does not ask or require them to leave any parts of their identity at the door.
Okay.
And so I think that whenever we're talking about the church or the Black church writ large, it's important to not, generalize all of the things. But what I can say is, from my experience, there's some work that is easier done in a community space than in a church space.
Okay.
If I'm in a space where I want to use oracle cards as a way to talk about how the symbolism can help us understand who we are and can help us understand our divinity, it's hard to do that in some churches.
Amen. I can see that would be hard.
You see what I'm saying? And so I think for me, it's using a mixed method approach means that everyone has to be flexible. So if church spaces can be flexible, then that is a helpful context. But if not, then I think we have to question and decide and explore what other spaces there are.
Okay. I think Candice, are you back with us?
Yes.
Can y'all see me?
Yes.
We can see you. We can see you.
Yes.
All right. Do not touch anything, Miss Benbow. Do not touch any.
I won't touch anything.
Do not touch anything. I am old and the least little thing. Okay. Don't touch anything.
I promise.
We're glad you are back with us.
Thank you.
Amen. Candice, Jade has started us off talking about the kind of work that she does and some of the spaces that she tries to work in, and how sometimes the work that she does can be difficult to get done in church spaces. And I've known you long enough to know, Candice, that some of your work by some folk has been considered antagonistic.
Right.
I think that's a churchy
That's a nice way
profession.
to say it.
Isn't it? I'm trying to be churchy today. Antagonistic towards the church. Tell me why you think that is, and what would you say to that?
So first, let me just say that, I'm excited for this conversation, and I'm just really excited to have it with Jade. I tell people all the time that I feel like Jade is our generation's mystic.
Okay.
And so the work that she does is just life-giving. And so to just do this conversation with her, it just means absolutely everything. Yeah, so it is. So they think that a lot of people think that to critique the church means that you dislike the church, right? And that can be further from the truth, right? My story, and I was listening to Jade tell her spiritual lineage. My story is that I am a child of a woman who refused to stand up in front of the congregation and repent for being pregnant. Right now, mind you, she was supposed to stand and apologize while my dad was still on the choir, and was not asked to do the same thing or to do the same thing. And as a daughter, as a member of a family, as a member of the community, it was as if she was the only person to have ever had a baby and be pregnant and not be married. And the story goes that the first time she felt me kick was in a church called Mercy Seat Holy Church in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And she took that as God's clear message that as long as she kept me in God's hands and connected to the church, I would be okay.
Okay.
And we would be okay. And so I grew up in church, right? Because that's where my mother believed I was supposed to be. But while I was in church, I also grew up hearing sermons that if my mom would have just obeyed God more and kept her legs closed, I wouldn't even be here, right? So there were so many sermons and there was so much of the Bible studies that really reinforced this notion that because I was not a parent, I was not a child of married parents, and because my mother did not see me as sin, the product of creating me as sin, that somehow I was inherently inferior, right? That took years of me believing that. And I'm not the only kid, right? There are women in our congregations who grew up hearing these same kinds of sermons. There are people who grew up in our churches hearing these same kinds of ideologies that they're somehow inferior because they are different in this regard, right? And so I think that we are the first generation that will be is extremely vocal about the trauma that we have experienced at the hands.
I don't know about that now.
Well, no.
I'm one of them vocal
what I mean by that is that millennials or millenniums, as old folks like to correct me.
Yeah. Okay, don't talk about the old people. I'm gonna tell Grandma Helen, don't do that.
That we do not have the same allegiance, okay, to the church.
Right.
Before there was this belief that you held the church accountable and certain things you just did not talk about. What happened in the house stayed in the house. What happened in the church stayed in the church. And if it was wrong, it was like, oh, but he's still a man of God. She's still, God's still working on him. We are a generation that's saying no to that. That no, it's not. You can be called and you can still be harmful, right? And you have been called and you have been harmful. And you can be critiqued. Exactly. And so part of it is that, I'm somebody that I'm not afraid to have a critique. I'm not afraid to voice that critique. Because when it's white supremacy and racism, Black male pastors have no problem vocalizing how sinful and evil white supremacy is. So I'm just gonna be just as vocal when I'm talking about misogyny, patriarchy, and sexism. And that doesn't mean I don't love the church. Okay. So that said, Candice, and not that you have to do this or anything, but because I know how much you love the church, how can you help pastors and religious leaders understand a generation of faith leaders like you, like Jade, who grew up in the church and have a deep love for the church, but don't have, let's say, a call to an inside the church ministry? Right. So one of the things that I do, I work with, I've been blessed to work in a consulting capacity with pastors for at least the last 2 years, where we work through some sermons. We work through schedules around Bible studies to really think through how the theology that they preach and teach attacks toxic masculinity, attacks patriarchy, attacks sexism. And in part of that, one, it reinforces that there are some of us like myself who are called to the church in a very different way, right? Like that our work is not confined to the four walls, but because of the restrictions of the four walls, there are going to be women, there are going to be queer folk who come to us because there are certain things, there are certain aspects of their spirituality that just can't be fulfilled and met in the church, right? Mm-hmm. And so part of the work that I've been blessed to do with working with pastors is to just really sit through and say, okay, so you want to preach about being pregnant with purpose. Why? What does this sermon, and I ask them, we go through this and I say, okay, you are a woman who has just lost her 6th child due to miscarriage. Mm-hmm. And you come to church and you hear your pastor quip very quickly that you're pregnant with purpose. How do you think that made you feel to hear? Mm-hmm. Right? You are a woman who is sitting here after having spent the last 2-3 days being abused verbally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and you hear from the pulpit that in order for God's glory to shine in your life, you have to be broken. And you have to, how does that resonate with you, right? So part of it is really just walking through and helping them to understand that just because we are not called to the church in very traditional ways, does not mean that we don't have ministry and tools that help to equip them to understand the women, to understand the queer folks, to understand the marginalized identities that are in their congregations.
And that you really are called to the church. You really are. You really are.
And it's a different kind of calling, right? Like that one of my favorite, and I've read it again since she has transitioned, but Beloved, and just really sitting with Baby Suggs Holy, and the fact that Baby Suggs Holy, anytime she was in the church, she critiqued and restrained. Mm-hmm. But when she went out into the clearing, folks got free, right? Like she had the same message in the church that she had out in the clearing, but for some reason, church folk didn't want to hear it because it wasn't packaged that same way. And some of those same folks who side-eyed her in the church were looking behind the trees and were
trying to get free.
That's it.
They were trying to get free too. And so it's like, there are some of us, if we look at the scripture where it says that God calls some of us to be teachers and some of us to be, apostles, and that we all have these different gifts, then it stands to reason that those of us who say we have been equipped by God to do work here, that we're not doing this work in competition with the church.
Right.
We're actually doing it in community if they would let us.
And there's so much work to be done.
Right.
It's not like, we really don't need any more folk because we ain't got any problems.
Everybody free. So
there's so much work to be done to help folk get free, stay free, etc., and then become disciples of freedom. Yes. So there's more than Jade. When I was going through your bio, you said that you do the work to help women unlearn spiritualized and internalized sensual and sexual repression. Say some more about that when we talk about all of this work of helping folk get free.
Yes. Okay. I'm gonna do this in a 2-part because I want to respond a little bit to something that Candice was saying.
Okay.
As someone who does mixed method healing services, so that means working with energy, working with auras, working with healing touch, working with divination, working with discernment. All of those things I think are spiritual services that clergy and church members and all these things desperately need for their healing. And we see parts and pieces. So I grew up in a spiritualist church, and what that looked like was the parts of the pieces where people will come to the altar and people will be hovering and tarrying and literally doing energy healing in the space, but not calling it that.
Right.
What's so important. And I think in our quest, I think, to get to that, the essence of those practices, that can be misunderstood for, this is antagonistic, or this is this, when really it's about like, how do we get to the essence of all of the practices that have sustained us across the diaspora? And how do we do that in a way that is collaborative and communicative? So that brings me deeper into the question that you initially posed, because it is those same practices that can help us to unlearn sexual and sensual repression. Here's what I've noticed. I have noticed that there are lots of women empowerment programs and things and dinners and teas and lunches and that start off in heteronormative lenses that teach and preach heteronormativity and like capitalism and patriarchy and replicate those things.
Amen. Jesus.
Give it a new logo and then give it a new motto and repackage it. And I think now, let me be clear, I'm not judging anyone's intent. I'm talking about the impact. So whether or not the intent was, women's empowerment, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the impact. And so sometimes the impact of programs like that, or the impact of, as Candice was saying, just sitting in church and hearing sermons that are not in any alignment with what's going on in a social cultural context, you can learn how to repress self, especially if you're a queer woman of color. You can learn how to repress your sensuality, your sexuality, in service of, the divine. One thing that we have learned through 19th century Victorian purity ideals is how to repress and how to suppress, and the positioning that gives us in a capitalist and white supremacist society. And so for me, it's important that we unlearn that, because now this is Bible. What does it profit a person to gain the world?
Bible, Jade.
No, right? And so for me, I think like your sensuality, your sexuality, that's a part of your soul. That's a part of
That's right.
In any of the ways that you express that. And so for me, it's not about let's hear more sermons to undo these things. It's let's engage some sacred texts that may not be in the Bible, that may not be within the canon of the Bible. Let's engage the sacred text of Toni Morrison. Let's engage the sacred text of Gloria Anzaldúa. Let's engage the sacred text of our own bodies and of our own lived experiences. And so for me, it's not my job to heal people or to give them like, these are the steps that you need to do, and then say it 3 times and it's done, right? That's not me. But it is my calling to provide the spaces and to provide the places and to help people kind of understand that there are diasporic traditions that are kind of our undercurrent and our line, and that we can tap into those things. We can tap into using roots and herbs and art and color and community and candles and energy, et cetera, to begin to unlearn sexual repression and sensual repression at the level of like our actual bodies, at the level of our actual material selves. Because it's one thing to hear about it. It's one thing to hear about freedom. It's one thing to hear about like, you don't have to repress your sexuality or sensuality to be a child of the divine. You can hear that, but you don't know it until you know it and you're knower, as my grandma would say.
Right.
And so the work and the art is about how do we bring that knowing into a more intimate space in our lives.
Yeah. And it's always interesting to me because I have 3 Facebook pages, and from time to time, of course, I'll check out other people's pages. And it's always interesting to me to see the comments about what witchcraft is. It's like, and I know these are well-meaning people. And it's like, and somebody will start to talk about energy and different ways that they're entering into their healing zone. And folk will go crazy. It's like those people who read those cards and those candles, and that's witchcraft. And it's stunning. It's well, you know, and it shouldn't be, because I understand how our culture boxes Christianity, how it boxes each religion, as a matter of fact. It boxes them. And so if anyone attempts to say, excuse me, I think this is a more holistic thing, it's like, no, that doesn't fit in the box. You must be doing witchcraft, you know. So it's just interesting to always see that. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you two on, so that we could talk about holistic approaches to how we understand faith, to how we get at healing, to how we get at wholeness, because these boxes are allowing people to die, just die. And they're within church walls and they are dying.
Right.
And people are fearful. They're just fearful of other ways to help folk get whole. So that's why I wanted, you know, you to talk about a bit about that. Candice, I often hear you say that, you know, I want to do some work to help sisters get free. Explain what you mean by that in light of what I just said and what Jade discussed.
Yeah, I think freedom first is the liberty to believe that at every moment of your life, the highs and the lows, that you are still good creation.
Good.
And unfortunately, we have not always had or been had messages that reaffirm that for Black women. Because the truth of the matter is that, I mean, when we even think about just the notion of purity.
Yes.
If we, like, as Jay was saying, when we look at these Victorian and Elizabethan ideas, like, they didn't even include us.
Right.
Women, particularly from our moment that we were brought over here, never ever seen or looked as anything that could be virtuous.
But did you have a purity ring in high school, Candice?
I didn't get it until college, which is the crazy part, was that, like, I was a virgin until I got to college. And I remember, like, I told my mama I'd had sex, and she was like, I thought you were gonna wait till you got married. And I was like, we never even had that conversation. Like, we never had that conversation. But then after I had sex for the first time, I believed that every single thing wrong in my life was because I did not wait until I was married.
Yeah.
And so the one thing that I knew that I could do, or believed that I could do, was if I rededicated myself, went through true love waits as a grown A woman, walked around with a ring in my 20s that said patiently waiting, that I took off wherever I got the most that somehow I would be okay.
Yes.
And it was not until I realized that, like, my ability to, my decision to be physically intimate with somebody had nothing to do with the ebb and flow of life, right? That life happens. That, to be honest, whether I slept with dude or not, I didn't need to be with that joker, no way, because he was trifling, right? that there were these ideas that my worth was somehow tied to my ability to be pure and to be chaste. And the unfortunate truth is that we always get these kind of messages that say that Black women, in order for Black women to be supported and affirmed, they have to go over and above and beyond.
Yes.
They have to check all of the boxes.
Yes.
At the moment you can't check all of the boxes, that's a problem, right? And so
not boxes you created.
Exactly.
That's the thing that always got me when people would talk about sex and marriage and love, I'm thinking to myself, that's not a box I put on the table.
I didn't do that to myself. And
exactly.
And then we have the ridiculous conversations about really what shook it for me was I was in college and I was sitting through a seminar on soul ties. And
soul ties.
And they had a book and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I will never forget, I went back to my dorm room and I called my mom and I was like, I did not realize that the reason why I kept crying and the reason why I was doing all of this was because I got a soul tie. She was like, you don't have a soul tie, you got a broken heart. And that's okay. right. And then she said something that shook me. She said, if you have to do all of that, break a soul tie, then what was the purpose of the cross?
Okay.
If the blood comes and saves and breaks every chain, why do you need to go through this 50-step program,
right,
to cleanse yourself of this man, right? And then it became this conversation of when I started to have questions. Okay, well, if I get a soul tie, if you get a soul tie every time you have sex, what about people who were raped? What about people who were molested as children? And the answer was, okay, well, God doesn't give those people soul ties. And I said, well, if God won't give them a soul tie, you mean God can stop a soul tie from happening, but couldn't stop the actual act of this violation from taking place? It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so the more I began to pick holes in the argument, and the more that I began to realize that my identity is both sensual,
right,
both spiritual. It is all of those things that come to make me. And then I began to read and understand what Ruth actually did. I began to read
for real
and understand the ways that sex and sex work was not only a part of how we understand faith, and a part of the biblical language and scripture, but it was also stuff that was affirmed and was celebrated. Our sexuality was not demonized.
Right.
And it pushed me to say, we actually have to really rethink how we understand ourselves as sexual, as sensual, and as spiritual beings. Because the truth is, and I'll say this and stop, is that I work with women every day who come to me as virgins.
Yeah.
Who were virgins when they were married.
Yeah.
And who confide in me because they can't confide in other people.
Right.
They have a disconnect when it comes to intimacy
with
their spouses because they have only understood themselves in the context of their virginity.
Right.
I had a friend who called me the night of her wedding night, locked in the bathroom crying because she said, when I do this, I'm not going to be a virgin anymore. But we automatically assume that, when they're married, it's because we hear the lies from popular Christians that are once you get married, girl, it's on and it's popping. Well, when you have consistently had a lifetime of hearing your sexuality and your sensuality demonized, that doesn't just turn off the moment that you get a ring.
Right.
And if nobody should get this, if nobody should understand this, women clergy should.
But if you're not trained, it doesn't matter if you're woman clergy or not. It just doesn't matter. If you've not been exposed, then you say the same things the men say because that's all you know. That's why, people, I think, sometimes think that I am being against those without degrees and pushing No, I'm pushing education for everybody. It's not about degree. It's about being educated. So you don't continue to oppress people in the name of Jesus, in the name of God, in the name of anything. But you can't do that if you are not exposed and understand things about sex, about sexual repression, about Elizabethan ideas. You've got to be exposed and understand that stuff. Jade, you are doing your Savor conference in 2020. And I'm just excited and interested. Tell me a bit more about that conference, Jade.
Yes. So Savor 2020. Savor 2020 is a part of the work of the Mystic Soul Project. And what the Mystic Soul Project does is that we center queer and trans people of color in healing and mysticism and in activism across various faiths, across non-faiths, across, mysticism, POC-centered mysticism, healing, and action and activism. And so Savor 2020, I love the Mystic Soul Conference every year. It's just a beautiful time to meet people across traditions with beautiful practices and ways that they experience the divine. And we also talk about some like real things like anti-racism and what that looks like as a mystic, because you can't be a mystic and be racist. That's not it.
Thank you.
You can't be a mystic.
That's what Howard Thurman did say that too.
Yes, you can't be a mystic and be homophobic. These things
Thank
are
you.
what we're trying to undo and discuss. And so Savor 2020 is going to actually be about, yes, having these conversations, yes, diving into all the seriousness of it, but also enjoying liberation, enjoying the path to get free. I think sometimes we get so mired, and I'll speak for myself, I get so mired in like, okay, we got to get free and we got to do this and we got to and yes, that's a part of the energy, but like the movement is also sexy and the movement is also beautiful, and the movement towards liberation is something that we can both fight, and we can also we can fight towards liberation, and we can also savor what that looks like, what that means. We can savor our bodies, it can savor our minds, we can savor our ideas, and the connections that we have with one another. So Savor 2020 is going to be so fun, and I'm so excited about it, because I think it's really going to be a little bit more focused on pleasure and joy and enjoyment, and what rituals and practices and traditions help us to access that space.
Okay, I might need to get there. She said pleasure and joy. All right, I'm down for that. Okay, that works for me. That works for me. Pleasure and joy and joy. You both are working with helping folk who are inside the church proper, people who love God, etc. If each of you had to name one, maybe two books that would help people begin their theological shift in terms of ways to help women in the church and in terms of queer theology, because we often really don't hear about we don't name the books on queer theology. So Jade, tell me, what would be your books if you wanted to help women in terms of their healing and in terms of queer theology? And then Candice, you give me a couple.
So like I said, I'm from a mystical and spiritualist tradition. So the books and choices will kind of reflect that. For me, doing what's fascinating to me is that people will come from the church and find me some kind of way in order to work with me, whether that's in the church or whether that's outside of the church. Most of them outside of the church, which is fascinating. And so a few books, I actually bought a few. African American Folk Healing by Stephanie Y. Mitchum is an amazing.
Okay, Jade, your microphone is going down just a little bit. We're not hearing you as well.
Can you hear me now? Is this good?
Yes, there you go.
Yes, so African American Folk Healing by Stephanie Y. Mitchum is a book that's really important to me, because I think it talks about what spirit has looked like and all of spirit's expressions in the Black mystical tradition. Another one is Black Magic, Religion and the African American Conjuring Tradition by Dr. Yvonne P. Chereau. And this talks about...
Say her last name again.
Dr. Yvonne P. Chereau.
For sure. Okay, Chereau. Okay.
And so that talks about the intimate connections that Black spiritualist spaces, churches, places have with the Black conjuring tradition across the world. And then the last one that I'll offer is Light in the Dark or Luz en lo Oscuro, Rewriting Identity, Spirituality, and Reality.
Hold that one up for us.
Yes, I will, by Gloria E. Anzaldúa. And this is an amazing book. I find it important to read about queer theory and queer lived experience by people who are queer, by people who are gay, by people who are trans, by people. And so
Right.
Gloria Anzaldúa is a lesbian Latina woman who since transitioned to the realm of the ancestors, but talks about rewriting identity and understanding that there's realities upon realities.
And the book is called Light in the Darkness.
Yes, Light in the Dark. And I think it's important for us to not even be boxed in around what we think is sacred text or what we think is liberatory text. And so those will be my kind of top three choices. Of course, you have the classics, Jesus and the Disinherited by Howard Thurman and all of those. But I think what I wanted to offer is something that's a little bit outside of the context to kind of round out the conversation.
Okay.
Candice, what would you offer?
So I'll give three. Two of them, and I probably will add this third one too. I call them Red Lip Theology Essential Texts. And like I have this, I've done a giveaway before, and I may do another one of just the Red Lip Theology like starter kit, and these are in there. The first one is Sisters in the Wilderness, the challenge of woman is
Yes,
God.
Lord. Classic.
By Dolores Williams, that fundamentally changed and reoriented how I come to understand ministry.
Yes.
And the role that it really plays in helping Black women combat gendered oppression. The second one is Unprotected Text by Jennifer Wright Nust, who is a Bible scholar and a Baptist preacher, who really went through the scriptures to combat this conversation and notion that the Bible has a clear and definitive stance on sex and sexuality, but it doesn't, right?
It doesn't.
And so often entirely too many people negate this when we say this as an argument of people who are not studied and who are not well learned. And here you have someone who is not only called to the church and who preaches, but is also a scholar who went through and was like, yeah, this is not, the case. And then the last book that really is something that transformed me is Indecent Theology by Marcellus Reed, who So Indecent Theology pulled the lens for me away from and gave me permission to really think about the divine and our sexuality as holy and wholeness. And so her work really drives and pushes us to rethink queerness from a space of divinity, to really reimagine and challenge how we understand our bodies and our sexuality and our sensuality in relationship, not only to God, but in relationship to purpose and the work that we're called to do. And so those three works are the ones that I find myself coming back to often to really just reimagine, rethink. The last one I'll give has to be The Salt Eaters by Toni Cade Bambara. Because we have to see what it looks like. For us to be healed and see what it looks like. I firmly believe that Black womanhood is its own spirituality. And that to see how Black women writers particularly thought through that and created characters and stories that helped us to understand what healing and wholeness and a thriving spiritual life could look like and how we can have those. Those are definitely, I think that any person who's serious, echoing Jade's book, I think any person who is serious about doing ministry for queer people, for Black women, for femmes, that they have to have these in their library and they have to critically read and engage these texts.
Right. And I think that's what I was saying earlier about those who unintentionally oppress. And it's because of a lack of exposure. We won't do the reading. You know, we won't do
We'll get the degree. Like that's the part that frustrates me.
We'll do the what?
We won't do the reading, but we'll get the degree, because I have the same degree, Jade, as well, as some of these pastors, women and men, right? And we were in the same classes. We got the same syllabi, right? But it's like, instead
but you still have to do, you know, still have to do the reading. I'm always tickled when I do shows and people ask me questions. And I know some of these people, and I know they have the degrees, but that doesn't mean they did the reading. So that's why I didn't say get the degree. I said you gotta do the reading. You got to do the reading.
One of the things that
and the wrestling.
Yeah, one of the things that I heard that I truly believe is that it's not enough to answer the call. You have to be faithful to the call.
Yes.
And being faithful to the call, and I want to say this really quickly to women who are in ministry. It's okay to go back and ask God to endow you again, right? That if you look at what is happening with women, if you look and you read that the statistics say that we are dying because of a lack of touch. Literally, doctors are saying that our bodies are craving touch so much that we are developing health issues.
Yes.
If you hear that and you know the conditions of Black women in your community, and the only thing that you can say to them is keep your legs closed until God sends you a husband, it's okay for you to go back to God and say, give me something else. Because what I believe that you have given me does not speak to the reality of the women who are who believe that you've called me.
Right.
Who are coming to me because they recognize and affirm the call that you have placed on my life. It's okay to say, endow me again and give me something else, because what you gave me right now is not what I believe you gave me. Is insufficient for the times and does not meet them in their circumstances.
Right. And I never talked to women about so much insufficiency as to say to them, life is a continuous ride, and you just need to get off at this stop, do some reading here, then get back on and ride. Get off at this stop, meet some people here, then get back on and ride. And in working with women, it's just important to me that women know you can just keep riding. You got to keep learning and growing, and God is not somewhere against you asking a question. Okay. And you haven't gone against your pastor by asking a question. And that person, maybe they don't need to be your pastor for this season. Maybe they need to be your pastor for last season. It's a ride.
Against your pastor.
Yes.
I come to this conversation from a very interesting perspective, just in that it's okay to challenge, and it's okay to say, this specific container right now is not centering my experience. And I think I would like to also uplift the practice of listening. If you can't read and you can't, do all of these things, and you don't have access to these materials, and even if you do, uplifting the practice of listening to queer people when they're telling you this is our experience in these places. Listening to trans people when it's like, this is our experience both inside of these spaces and outside of these spaces.
Right.
The practice of listening not to decide how you feel about a thing.
Right.
But listening to understand that, like, there are realities that are beyond your reality.
that you have no concept of.
Right. And so I think for me, that is also part of the mystical tradition, is the practice of listening, and the practice of contemplating, and the practice of sitting long enough with people's joy and with their pain and with their stories, so that you can see the seed of the divine both in them and in yourself.
Absolutely.
So I think that there's also a blessing of just like admitting when you're like, this, I have no idea about queer people of color because I'm, you know what I mean? And so and listening from that space, I think is also an important practice.
And that's an honest space. You know, I don't have any problems when the brothers call me and you all, and you know, and the sisters, and you know they do. Doc, I don't know what this trans, bi, LGQQ, they always get the letters wrong. I don't know what that, and that's fine. That's fine that you don't know. So who you want to listen to? Who you want to listen to? Because I tell folk who I, especially those I work with in a consulting basis, sometimes you just need to be quiet and listen. You can learn something if you just listen.
Yeah.
You know, and I think women get this, and I'm not going to say quicker than men, but women often get this because we're often not allowed to talk.
Right.
And so we really did listen. And we got the good and the bad. We heard all of it. So Jade, I appreciate you saying that and pushing the power of listening, because I think less and less of that is going on social media. We're not listening. We're not listening to one another. We're not listening. And I'm working myself now on when people say things that light my hair on fire. Oh yeah. You know, really burst into flames. I'm working on just saying, okay. Just saying my comment is okay. And I may have to scroll on by it. I may have to delete it. I may have to do some things. I may have to go back to it. But I don't even want my first inclination to just comment.
Right.
I don't even want that to be my inclination.
Well, as somebody who traditionally lights folks' hair on fire on social media, I just want to make clear and hope that people understand that for some of us, particularly women like Jade and myself, who do this work, social media is our space, right? Like if we, and this is a whole nother conversation, but if we want to tell the truth about the whole thing, church really is encroaching on our clearing, right?
Oh, that church is on your clearing. Okay.
Yeah, like the digital space. Social media is, and I'm using some of the work that Melva Sampson does around digital hush harbors. Like these are our spaces, and because we've been pushed out of traditional spaces, because we've been seen as antagonistic to the church, and we have been able to find, create, and sustain community in digital space. And now you have church who sees how successful, for lack of a better term, women like myself have been in digital space. And instead of really sitting and listening, instead of seeing how they can partner with and support us, they want to take the tools that we use and co-opt them for what they're doing
for free. Also,
so always for free. Always for free.
And so the truth is that what gets really frustrating is when you have people who are in traditional church spaces who then come into the digital space and the social media sphere and push back and continuously challenge us to say that what we are doing is not biblical. What we're not doing is faith-based. We don't go in y'all's churches on Sunday morning and stand up in your face and say that what you all are preaching is not biblical and is not faith-based. And so they don't see.
Well, Candice says she doesn't do that. I'm not gonna say I haven't.
I mean, I don't do it. I don't do it in the pulpit. I don't do it at the church. I'll post about it. But the truth is that they do not respect the digital space and the social space as the clearing in which Black women like us, queer folks, are doing our work because y'all don't want us in your churches doing
Right.
this work. So y'all go where y'all are. Let us be free where we are, and pray that the same spirit that is getting us free and is meeting us in the clearing will meet you at your church. If you don't want to be with us, right? Pray that the spirit bears witness to you in some kind of way that affirms that our work is necessary, it's relevant, it is timely, and it's ordained. Right. It really is ordained and spirit filled.
Amen. Amen. Let the church say amen. Let the hush harbor say amen. Let social media say amen.
Yeah.
We're going to close right there. I cannot thank you two wonderful individuals enough for spending this time with me and for just helping. And I believe you've helped so many people get free today. And you'll see the comments. You know, all of my broadcasts stay up for 4 or 5 days before I go to the next one, etc. And like I said, I know that you've helped some people today to get free, to ask some questions. I thank you for sharing your stories and your experiences and the books. And I'm praying for both of you that the work that you are doing will just continue to explode all over the place, because it's so important. It's so wonderful. It's so necessary, and it's so liberating. It's so, and I'm about the pleasure, the joy, and etc. But that liberating really grabs hold of me. And I know you all do that kind of work. I know you do that kind of work. So I pray the sincerest blessings of the divine upon you and all the work that you do. Thank you to each of you for listening to me and my guest. This is Dr. Martha Simmons with another session of Preaching and Preachers on Facebook Live. Again, we're praying for those impacted by the hurricane. I hope those of you who can are enjoying the holiday. And remember, if you have been helped by this broadcast, please share it. I hope you'll be generous enough to contribute to my Cash App. But if not, please share the video. There are people who've never been exposed to these kinds of discussions, and they're trying to get free. And this will help them. Just share the video. It won't cost you anything. God bless. And the Lord says the same. I'll see you again next Monday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time for another session of Preaching and Preachers. God bless.